Emily woke before the alarm that morning, her mind already busy with the quiet weight of routine. The house was still, wrapped in early light, the kind that made everything look softer than it really was. She lay still for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds, Daniel moving in the kitchen, the hum of the coffee machine, the low whistle he made without realizing it. Something felt different. When she stepped into the kitchen, Daniel turned and smiled at her. Not his usual polite smile. This one was warm, almost nervous, like he was holding a secret too big to keep for long. "Good morning," he said. Emily studied his face. "Why are you smiling like that?" He laughed lightly and placed a mug in front of her. "Just drink your coffee." She sat, watching him move around the kitchen with an energy she hadn't seen in months. Daniel had been tired lately. Long workdays. Short conversations. Even their silences felt rushed. But this morning, he seemed present. Awake. After a few minutes, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope. He slid it across the table toward her. Emily frowned. "What's this?" "Open it." Her fingers paused for half a second before she did. Inside were printed flight tickets. Dates. A destination she had once mentioned casually, years ago, during one of their late-night talks. Her breath caught. "A vacation?" she asked. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching her closely. "I thought we could use it." Emily stood and hugged him without thinking. For a brief moment, everything felt light again. Like the early days. Like promises that still lived somewhere between them. "I needed this," she whispered. Daniel hugged her back, but his arms tightened just a little too quickly, like he was afraid of holding on for too long. They packed fast. Emily moved through the house with new energy, folding clothes with care, imagining quiet mornings and long talks. She imagined laughter without interruption. Space to breathe together. The drive to the airport was filled with music they both loved but rarely played anymore. Daniel tapped the steering wheel. Emily rested her head against the window, watching the road blur past. She felt hopeful. At the airport, Daniel parked and grabbed their bags. As they walked inside, the crowd grew thicker, louder. Emily stayed close to him, her hand brushing his arm. Then she saw them. Two men standing near the departure gate, laughing loudly. Mark and Jason. Daniel's longtime friends. The ones who showed up for game nights and weekend plans. The ones who filled rooms with noise. Emily slowed her steps. Daniel followed her gaze and cleared his throat. "Oh. There they are." Her heart dropped, slow and heavy. "They?" she asked. Daniel smiled again, but this time it was careful. "Surprise." Emily searched his face for explanation, for reassurance. Mark noticed them and waved, already walking over. "Man, I can't believe we're doing this," Jason said, clapping Daniel on the shoulder. "About time we all got away." Emily forced a smile. Her chest felt tight, like the air had shifted without warning. Mark nodded at her. "Hope you don't mind." Daniel said you were cool with it. She looked at Daniel. He avoided her eyes. "Of course," she said, because saying anything else felt too public, too sharp. "Sounds fun." The word tasted strange. They checked in together. Sat together. Laughed together. Emily sat slightly apart, listening more than speaking. The men talked about work, old stories, plans for the trip. Emily waited for Daniel to include her, to say something that reminded everyone this trip had started with her. But he didn't. When they boarded the plane, Emily took the window seat. Daniel sat beside her. Mark and Jason sat across the aisle. As the plane lifted off, Emily watched the city fall away beneath the clouds. She thought of the envelope on the kitchen table. How her heart had raced. How quickly expectations could change shape. Daniel leaned toward her. "You okay?" She nodded. Just tired. He accepted that answer too easily. The flight passed in pieces. Laughter. Snacks. Stories she'd heard before. Emily smiled when needed. She stared out the window when she didn't. She wondered when the idea of us had quietly become all of us. When they landed, the warm air greeted them. The destination was beautiful, just as she imagined. Palm trees, open sky, the promise of rest. Emily tried to let the beauty soften the disappointment. At the resort, the men moved ahead, already planning drinks and activities. Emily stayed behind with Daniel as they waited for their room keys. This place is amazing, Daniel said. It is, Emily replied. She wanted to ask why he hadn't told her. Why he hadn't asked. Why he thought sharing their time would fix something that already felt thin. But the lobby was crowded. The moment slipped away. As they walked toward their rooms, Emily felt the quiet distance settle between them. Not loud. Not angry. Just there. The vacation had begun. And Emily realized she had stepped into a story she didn't know how to finish yet. Emily woke to sunlight spilling across the balcony. The resort was alive with colors she had only imagined in magazines: turquoise water, white sand, palm trees swaying gently. For a moment, she let herself breathe. Maybe this trip could still be what she had hoped for. Downstairs, Daniel and the others were already laughing, voices carrying through the open-air lounge. Mark was joking loudly about an old fishing trip, Jason was teasing him back, and Emily felt herself shrink slightly in the background. She had imagined mornings with Daniel, quiet breakfasts, gentle conversation. Instead, the day moved fast, full of other voices and plans she hadn't agreed to. Emily tried to shake off the small knot in her chest. She joined them at breakfast, smiling and nodding, laughing when prompted. She listened to stories of misadventures, fishing trips, and old pranks. Daniel was animated, his laughter easy, his energy bright. But it was not for her. She noticed how he leaned in to hear Mark better, how he joked with Jason, how he was part of a small bubble that she couldn't enter. After breakfast, they walked along the beach, sandals in hand, the sun warming their shoulders. Emily stayed a little behind, watching Daniel playfully push Jason into the shallow waves. He looked so happy, so free, and she felt a pang of longing. Not for the fun they were having, but for the connection she had imagined having with him. She found a quiet spot near the water and sat, letting the tide lap at her toes. The sand was soft, the breeze salty, but the silence around her only made her feel more alone. She thought about the life they had back home, how much they had changed. How much he had changed. Daniel eventually wandered over, brushing sand off his feet. "Hey," he said softly, crouching beside her. Emily forced a smile. "Hey." He sat in silence for a moment, watching the waves. Emily's heart ached. She wanted to reach for him, to tell him that she missed him already, that she needed him with her, not lost in laughter with other people. "I thought this would be fun for everyone," Daniel said finally. His voice carried that soft guilt she had heard in passing before. Emily shook her head, feeling the frustration build. I thought it would be fun for us," she admitted. "I wanted time with you. Not with everyone else." Daniel looked down, shifting uncomfortably. "I didn't think about it that way," he said quietly. "I thought including them would make it lighter, easier. I didn't realize," his voice trailed off. Emily didn't answer. She turned back to the ocean, watching the horizon blur with the sun. She wanted to be angry, but mostly, she just wanted him. The man she had fallen in love with, who now seemed so far away. The day moved on. They swam in the ocean, lounged by the pool, took photos with Mark and Jason that Emily smiled through but didn't really feel. Every time she looked at Daniel, he was engaged somewhere else, telling a story, laughing at a joke, planning the next activity. And she began to understand that this wasn't just about friends tagging along. It was about attention, about connection, about feeling chosen. That evening, the sunset was a blaze of color over the water. Emily and Daniel walked along the beach, their feet sinking into the sand. Mark and Jason were further ahead, wrapped up in conversation. Emily wanted to stop and breathe, to let the sky remind her of why she loved him. But when she tried, the words didn't come easily. She could feel the tension in her chest, the quiet ache of being overlooked. Daniel reached for her hand, warm and familiar, but the moment felt tentative, incomplete. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Emily forced a nod. "Yeah," she said, though the word tasted hollow. They walked in silence. Waves broke at their ankles. The sun sank slowly, and with every passing second, Emily felt more acutely the gap between them, not anger, not blame, but a quiet disappointment that grew heavier with each unspoken thought. When they returned to the resort, she lingered by the balcony, watching the lights flicker on across the water. Daniel joined her again, this time sitting close, his shoulder brushing hers. She wanted to lean into him, to let everything melt away, but the distance remained. I miss you," she admitted softly, surprising herself with the honesty. Daniel didn't answer at first. He only shifted, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I'm here," he said. Emily wanted more than that. She wanted presence, attention, a moment that reminded her that they were still a team. That the man who had surprised her with this trip hadn't forgotten why he had invited her along in the first place. They stayed on the balcony until the sky turned deep blue. The stars reflected on the water, silent witnesses to the tension, the longing, the quiet hope that lingered between them. Later, Emily sat in the room, brushing her hair and thinking about how quickly a dream can shift into something complicated. She remembered the tickets, the envelope, the excitement she had felt. She thought about Daniel's laughter, the sound that used to make her heart race. And she wondered if they could find their way back to that moment, if the vacation could still be theirs, not just a shared experience with friends but a memory made together. Daniel knocked gently on the door before coming in. He didn't sit immediately, just leaned against the frame, watching her. "I know today wasn't exactly what you wanted," he said quietly. Emily paused, meeting his eyes. "It wasn't what I imagined," she admitted. "I want it to be," he said. "I want us to find that space, even here." She nodded, feeling the first small flicker of hope. It wasn't everything. But it was a start. Outside, the waves rolled endlessly, steady and patient. Inside, Emily felt her heart begin to settle, knowing that tomorrow could be different, if they tried. And as she closed her eyes that night, listening to the distant sound of laughter from the other rooms, she realized that the vacation wasn't just about beaches or sunsets. It was about rediscovering each other, one quiet moment at a time. The next morning, Emily woke before Daniel again. She felt the tension from yesterday still clinging to her like the humid ocean air. She got dressed quietly, slipping out to the pool area while Daniel and the others were still inside. The resort was waking slowly, staff arranging chairs, the ocean glittering in the sunlight, a few early risers already swimming. Emily settled into a lounge chair, letting the water glimmering nearby calm her nerves. She tried not to think about how Daniel had drifted into his friend's circle yesterday. She tried not to think about how small she had felt, sitting on the balcony while he laughed with Mark and Jason. But the feeling was stubborn. She couldn't shake it. Lily, Mark's wife, appeared a few minutes later, carrying a towel and a bottle of water. She smiled gently at Emily. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "Of course not," Emily replied, grateful for the quiet company. Lily sat down, and for a while, they just watched the pool shimmer under the sun. Then, softly, Lily spoke. "You're upset," she said, matter-of-factly. Emily sighed, looking down at her hands. I thought this trip was supposed to be for us," she admitted. "I didn't expect it to be this." Lily nodded knowingly. "Marriage changes," she said. "Sometimes you don't notice until something like this happens. You think a trip will fix things, but it can also show you what's missing." Emily stared at the water. It was true. She had felt distant from Daniel for months, but she had buried the feeling under work, routines, and casual conversations. Now it was impossible to ignore. "I don't know how to tell him," Emily said. "I don't want to ruin the trip, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine." "You tell him," Lily said simply. Gently but honestly. "Sometimes people don't know what they're doing until you tell them." Emily nodded, heart thudding. She knew Lily was right. She had to speak. Waiting any longer would only make the distance grow. That afternoon, while the men were out snorkeling, Emily found Daniel sitting on the balcony outside their room. He had a book, but he wasn't really reading. He looked up when she approached. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. Daniel set the book down, leaning back in the chair. "Of course," he said, his voice calm. But Emily noticed the tension in his shoulders. "I feel invisible," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I wanted this trip to be just for us. I didn't want to be surrounded by everyone else all the time. I feel like I'm here, but I'm not really part of it." Daniel's face softened. He looked away, then back at her, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I didn't think about it that way," he admitted. "I thought including Mark and Jason would make things lighter. I didn't realize I was leaving you behind." Emily's chest tightened. "I don't need grand gestures or big plans. I just need you to notice me. To choose me, even when everyone else is around." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right. I got caught up in wanting everyone to have fun, and I forgot the person who matters most, my wife." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. Emily felt a mixture of relief and lingering frustration. The acknowledgement mattered, but the time lost couldn't be erased. "I don't want this trip to feel like a mistake," she said quietly. "It won't," Daniel promised. "We'll fix it. We'll start over. Just the two of us when it counts." Later, Daniel spoke with Mark and Jason. Emily waited outside, pacing the balcony, trying to calm her racing thoughts. When he returned, his expression was softer, lighter. Plans for group dinners were adjusted. Some activities were postponed or rearranged so that he and Emily could have space alone. For the first time since they arrived, Emily felt like the trip could actually be theirs. Not just a vacation with friends tagging along, but a chance to reconnect. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Daniel suggested a walk along the beach. Emily hesitated briefly, then nodded. They left the resort behind, the sand cool beneath their feet as the tide rolled in. "Thank you for being honest," Daniel said. "I needed to hear it. I didn't realize how much I had neglected us." Emily looked up at him, the ocean reflecting gold and pink across her face. I want to feel like we matter to each other," she said. "Even in the small things. Even when it's not perfect." Daniel nodded, reaching for her hand again, this time intentionally. "You do. You matter. And I don't want to forget that again." They walked in silence, the sound of the waves filling the space where words weren't needed. Emily could feel the tension easing, the invisible walls between them softening. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a start. By the time they returned to the resort, the stars were out. The ocean shimmered under the moonlight. Emily felt a quiet hope, something fragile but real. She realized that sometimes, honesty could be more powerful than surprises, more important than grand gestures. That night, lying in bed, she thought about the day. The argument she hadn't had, the conversation that had finally happened, the promise in Daniel's eyes. She knew the next few days would matter. That they would have to keep choosing each other, moment by moment, but for the first time, she believed it was possible. The friends were still around, their laughter echoing faintly from the rooms nearby, but it no longer felt like a wall. Emily and Daniel had begun rebuilding the space that belonged only to them. And as she drifted to sleep, she knew that what they were building together, attention, honesty, connection, was more important than any vacation, any trip, any plan. Tomorrow would bring more moments, more choices. But for the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she and Daniel were on the same side again. Like the distance between them could shrink. Like the love they had buried under daily life could find a way to bloom, even with the sun, the sand, and the presence of friends just steps away. And for the first time in days, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of waves breaking gently on the shore. Sunlight spilled into the room, painting the walls gold. She felt a quiet nervous excitement, a sense that today could be different. She slipped out of bed and found Daniel already standing on the balcony, looking out at the water. His posture was relaxed, but there was a seriousness in his gaze that made her heart flutter. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied, turning toward her. His eyes held a mixture of apology and hope. "Ready to walk?" Emily nodded, slipping into her sandals. The day was warm, the breeze light, carrying the salty smell of the ocean. They left the resort behind, walking barefoot along the soft sand. Each step left temporary imprints that the tide soon washed away, a small reminder that moments could be fleeting if not cherished. For the first time since the trip began, there were no friends around. No Mark, no Jason, no other voices. Just the two of them, alone with the endless sky and the rhythmic crash of the waves. Emily felt a flutter of anticipation and relief. This was the space she had been longing for, the space that belonged to them alone. Daniel glanced at her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I wanted this to be special," he said, voice low and earnest. "Not just the trip but us. Just us, for a little while." Emily's chest tightened. She had waited for this. For him to notice, to make the effort to prioritize them. "I needed this," she admitted, her voice barely above the sound of the waves. "I don't need big surprises or fancy plans. I just need to feel chosen." Daniel stopped walking and took both of her hands in his. His eyes searched hers. "I choose you," he said simply. "Every day. Even when life gets busy. Even when friends, work, or anything else tries to take you away from me. You're the reason this matters." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. She could see it in his eyes, hear it in the sincerity of his voice. For months, she had carried quiet doubts, small fears that he was drifting, that the connection they once had was fading. But hearing him say these words made the doubts shrink, just a little, like morning mist under the sun. They resumed walking, their hands intertwined, stepping over shells and wet sand. The conversation flowed gently, naturally, as if they had been practicing it for years. Daniel shared his regrets, small things he hadn't noticed about how he'd been distant. Emily spoke about the moments she had felt invisible, the tiny ways attention and affection had slipped away in their daily lives. Neither spoke with anger. It was honest, calm, emotional, and necessary. "I want us to have space like this more often," Daniel said. "Even if it's just a walk along a quiet beach. Even if it's 10 minutes before dinner. I don't want to take you for granted again." Emily smiled, feeling her heart lift. "We need to protect it," she said. "Not just the big trips. Not just the vacations. Us." The tide rolled over their feet, gentle and consistent. Emily leaned into Daniel's side. She felt the familiar comfort of his arm around her shoulder, but this time it was deliberate, attentive, full of intention. They stopped to watch a flock of seagulls skim the waves, laughing softly when one nearly collided with Daniel's head. The simplicity of the moment made everything else, the crowded dinners, the missed attention, fade away. They continued walking until the sun began its slow descent. The sky turned a brilliant mix of orange, pink, and purple. Daniel suggested sitting for a while, and they found a large rock near the shore. Sitting side by side, they watched the colors shift over the horizon, their hands still linked. Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. This was the connection she had been craving. This was the man she had chosen years ago, the man who could still surprise her not with gifts or trips, but with presence, attention, and commitment. I forgot sometimes, Daniel said quietly, how much the small moments mean. How much just being with you matters more than anything else. Emily reached for his face, brushing a hand along his jawline. It's okay, she whispered. We both forgot sometimes. But we can remember now. Daniel leaned in and kissed her forehead, a gentle, grounding gesture. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic. It was simple and meaningful, and Emily felt her chest fill with warmth. She realized that love wasn't about perfect moments. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when life wasn't perfect. The walk back to the resort was quiet, comfortable. They didn't need to fill the air with conversation. The sound of the waves, the cool evening breeze, and the feeling of being together was enough. When they reached the resort, the friends were there, laughing over a late snack. Emily and Daniel shared a glance and a subtle smile. The world around them could exist, but their connection was theirs alone, unshaken by distraction. That night, Emily and Daniel stood on their balcony again, watching the moonlight dance across the water. Thank you, she said softly, leaning into him. For what? He asked, though he already knew. For choosing me, she replied. For being here, really here. Daniel kissed her hair, holding her close. Always, he said. It's you. Always you. They stayed like that for a long time, the ocean whispering below, the stars blinking above. The trip hadn't started the way Emily had imagined. There had been tension, disappointment, and moments where she had felt invisible. But in these quiet, deliberate moments, they rebuilt what mattered most. Presence, attention, and the choice to put each other first. In the coming days, they spent time together differently. Walks before breakfast, quiet dinners alone, laughter shared without distraction. Emily watched Daniel pay attention to her again, not the distracted, half-present attention of before, but real, intentional, full attention. And she responded in kind, noticing him, appreciating the small gestures he hadn't realized mattered. On the last night of the vacation, they stood at the edge of the beach one more time, hands entwined. The air was warm, the waves gentle, the sky a deep, peaceful indigo. Emily looked at Daniel and felt a calm she hadn't felt in months. This trip, it wasn't perfect, she said softly. But I think it's perfect in the ways that matter. Daniel smiled, brushing his thumb along her hand. We made it ours, he said. We chose each other. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, listening to the quiet rhythm of the ocean. She realized that vacations, surprises, friends, none of that mattered as much as this, choosing, noticing, and being present. And as they stood together, watching the horizon fade into night, Emily knew that the most important journey wasn't the plane ride, the beach, or even the sunrises. It was the journey of returning to each other, over and over in small and meaningful ways. For the first time in days, Emily felt completely at peace. She was seen. She was chosen. And with Daniel beside her, she knew that no matter what life threw at them next, they would continue to choose each other, every day, every moment, and always. The vacation ended, but something far more enduring had begun.